I'm really very pleased to meet you.
And pleasure
And
to meet you too.
yes, and thank you for joining me in this conversation. And actually, the context is the York Unlimited campaign of the university, and that is about mental health research and student mental health, which we also think is very important. Yeah, I'm one of the professors working on that in the university. And um, we thought that you are an advocate for mental health and mind in particular, and you have also given much thought on your own mental health, and so we thought you would be an excellent person to give us your insights on that.
Well, thank you.
Yeah. And actually, well, we are now currently, of course, in this pandemic, which is quite something, and it has huge effects on our way of life. Um, we are in lockdown. We have to socially distance, which is not at all in our nature. I think, at least of most of the people, and we can lose our loved ones. We can lose our jobs. And actually, when the pandemic will be over, it might very well be that there are still mental health issues then. And I wondered, can you give me your thoughts about what, according to you, would be the greatest concerns then for mental health?
Well, I think it's interesting with you having the background of a university campus. One of the first things I think about is youth, young people. It seems to be, and I think we've known this instinctively in the culture before, science and epidemiology and empirical research proved it, that
Yes.
late adolescence into early adulthood seems to be a very vulnerable time for young people. It seems to be slightly more men than young women, but that's not especially important because it's a lot in both cases. And probably people know the sort of urban myths that have been in existence for decades. When students arrive at a university, someone will tell them, this university has the highest suicide rate in Europe. And every student has been told that about their
Yeah,
university.
really.
So whether you went to Bristol or York or Cambridge, there's a sort of black humor about that. And what it is the fact that people have always recognized that young people leaving home, gathering together in the intense atmosphere of a university, are especially subject to self-doubt, feeling excluded, and for anxieties and stresses to build up in enormous ways. Now, things have changed in the past 10 or 15 years in terms of pastoral care, especially in the realm of mental health for students, both from the students' unions and from the chaplaincies and from the medical departments of the university. So there's a lot good going on. But this pandemic, of course, amplifies and magnifies so many of those issues. And I think partly people are worried about whether they're getting it wrong. There's this terrible, when it's just a normal academic year, students are fearful that they're losing out, they're not catching up, everybody's cleverer than they are, they've missed out on various social skills, and that they're just lonely and they can't join in. But when you add to this the pandemic, there's a feeling that other people have got more friends, a better support network, or other people seem to be more cheerful because social media is showing them as baking cakes and laughing with their friends. And I'm not like that. I'm lonely and I'm anxious and I'm very, very upset about my future, which I can't see it. All these things obviously make what is already a hothouse, a university campus, an even more threatening place for many people. It's important to allow young, sensitive people to be sensitive, to be afraid. The whole sort of point of student fellowship is that you can explore this amongst yourselves, and laugh at yourself and be supported and have a kind of healthy ability to examine your own mental and cognitive nature, because that's part of what university allows you a space to do. But all that is now out of the window. And
It is
yeah,
a, yeah, well, we have been talking a lot in the university about the students and how we can support them, because it is obvious that um, this is a very challenging time, and they are very young. You're right, and the thing is, growing older actually makes you more resilient, because you can think of ways you used to try to cope with problems in the past, and you know a bit what worked and what didn't. But for young people, it's everything happens for the first time. I mean, you go to the university for the first time, you leave the house of your parents, you're trying a study, it's all new, and so that is new. And then there's this pandemic. Well, the pandemic, I think, for all of us is new. That we can say, and that unites us. I think that actually, we did a study and we did a survey amongst students in university and staff, actually, because we were concerned about that. And the interesting thing was that we found that certainly people are stressed. They felt all kinds of stress and concerns and anxieties and lower mood. But actually, many of them also felt resilience. And
yes,
yes, so
that's
it's,
very interesting.
yes,
Yeah.
we thought that, and we are exploring that currently, because actually it we think that it can be very helpful to know what enhances your resilience, what helps you to cope with it. Because obviously we are humans, we have to cope with very
Yes, and it's very interesting, isn't it? Resilience is a fascinating word. It's not one we often use, and an even more old-fashioned English word, I suppose, is fortitude. And
oh yeah, that's a
this
nice word.
reminds me of an interesting phenomenon, which is the rise in popularity of the ancient philosophy of Stoicism.
Oh
There
yes.
are all kinds of apps, and it's kind of melded with forms of mindfulness that are available online and in different forms. And of course, the major takeaway, as an American would say, of Stoicism is about resilience. It's not that you don't show emotion, but it is about an acceptance of the things you can't change. And
Yeah.
they seem very obvious and very cliche, but there's something rather encouraging about Stoicism in it. It's
Yeah.
not an intense immersion into a constant, it's very easy to pick at the mental scabs and constantly be examining one's mental state in such a way that one thinks one has to be improving it and getting it right. And so much of the anxieties that people feel, I think, are guilt at somehow not having got life right.
Yeah.
And the secret I always want to get across is nobody gets life right. There is no
No,
golden path to happiness.
no,
What
no.
you see as other people being happiness is merely their particular mask. And you accept and accept yourself and accept certain states of mind that needn't be medicalized. Loneliness, sorrow. I think a lot of people don't realize that it's perfectly natural to wake up in the morning, remember this pandemic and what it's doing to the world and to society, and be sorrowful. It doesn't have to have a special psychological word. It is a genuine sadness that I think is very healthy. We should be sad. We should grieve over the various losses that are being every day being felt by people socially, culturally, and in terms of their own strength of mind. And uh, I'm certainly not suggesting we don't look at genuine medical mental health issues that are real conditions and so on. But the history of mental health, and you'll know this better than I, is a very difficult one, because diagnosis is so much harder when it comes to the mind, behavior, and mood and personality than it is
Yes,
with
that is true. Yeah.
the bones. An orthopedic surgeon doesn't really have to keep redefining the femur. But if you look at, some people may be familiar with the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual, the DSM as it's
Yes.
known, which
Hmm.
over the decades has attempted to define various mental conditions. Famously and notoriously, homosexuality was
Oh
a
yeah.
mental health disorder
Yes,
not
yes,
very long ago in my lifetime.
yes, I know. Yeah, that is
And
something.
so, and that's an extreme example of the point I'm making, that there's a constant reassessment of how we talk about the mind, behavior, feeling, and so on, and the major disruptions.
Yes, and I think in that respect, actually, what is very important is to realize that we do not live in a vacuum.
No.
We live in a society. For example, what you say about homosexuality, there will be, in the old Greek society, it was not a problem at all, at least for the men. I don't know how it was for the women, actually. But if society does not accept it, then it becomes a problem, and then you have issues, and that may destabilize you enormously. But
Yes.
I think the role of society also in loneliness. You mentioned loneliness. I think we find in research that there are real associations between loneliness and mental health, but also physical health issues.
Yes.
For example,
Yes.
pain. Yeah,
I
pain.
think that's right. And it's a thing that's now more understood perhaps than it used to be, is the relationship between mental health and physical outcomes. What you as a professional would call the morbidity
Yes.
levels are very high. And this brings us on to a thing that people in universities and all over Britain and the world will understand, and that is that those whose interior weather is tumultuous and is causing them pain or numbness or overexcitement,
Yeah.
all the variations that you can have inside, especially if it's not been diagnosed. The natural thing is to reach for something to quell this noise, and that could be alcohol or some form of recreational or other kind of drug, an opiate or a stimulant. We know the story. It is no accident that young people are drawn to changing their minds with drugs, because what's going on in their minds is not happy for them. They're not.
No.
And it's all very well to tell them that further down the road that this will be a wholly destructive and be a worse outcome. That's easily said. The fact is, if only alcohol quietens their mind, or only cocaine or speed gives them the ability to get up and enjoy some sort of music and conversation and life, it's pretty hard to be told no.
Yeah, well, we looked into that actually, because as I said, we were very interested in resilience, and we explored the people who felt resilient, if they did anything different from the other students or had certain characteristics. Actually, the main one was that they exercised. So
Yes.
they exercised, and the non-resilient ones did not exercise. Now, those could have reasons not to. For example, if they had some medical condition that made it difficult for them, or they had to socially isolate because of the virus and couldn't go out to exercise. But in general, exercising is very good.
I think that's right. I think the growth in understanding of the circadian rhythms, so going out for a morning walk, the sunlight on the eye, as well as the exercise itself, the dopamine rushes and the rewards you get, the whole business, and also on the other side, the increasing research on the neurons in one's own gut and the microbiome, the biota. All of these things seem to have an effect on mental well-being, a very strong one. The thing I would say is, this is just going by my memory, when I'm in my 20s, I don't think about my health. I might think about my vanity and do a bit of bodybuilding, or I might still enjoy sport. When you get to my age, you can buy all kinds of prebiotic gummies, and you can check you're walking on your watch, and you can, you care for your body because you are aware of how contingent and provisional your health is. But for the young, the whole reward of being young is they never have to think about when they stand up going like and all that sort of thing. It's it's just really it's the more one looks at the world as it currently is, pandemic and all, it's just so unfair on the young. You used to be such a reward. You know, the world used to be full of old people wagging their fingers at the young, saying, "You don't know how lucky you are." And the world now is full of old people pointing at young people and saying, "You don't know how unlucky you are.
Yeah.
When I was your age, I had a car and a flat, and you'll never have a house. You'll never have a job." You know, it's actually, it's how young people haven't risen up in some sort of revolt. It's more than I can understand.
Well, sometimes they do. Sometimes they do. I think, yeah.
If they do, nothing like as much as they did in the 1960s and 70s.
Oh, well, that is true. Yes.
I suppose one of the things we haven't talked about, and again, this, you know, I think like you, I tend towards the empirical rather than the rational. And so you look at social media and say, well, it must do this and it must do that. Even now, enough research hasn't really been done to prove precisely what the effects of social media are on the young, but we can all certainly, as I say, without being fully empirical, we can all sort of reason that there is something going on in terms of people's sense of self when measured against this vast conversation of the world. And we all remember what it's like when in the playground at school, if we were unpopular for for a week, for some reason, everybody hated us, and arriving at school and having to meet people's eyes and being alone in the corner of the playground. This is magnified by a million %.
Yes.
And we do hear of young people killing themselves because they've lost followers that day on some social media service. And those things are deeply disturbing. But on the other hand, we have to recognize that there is an ability people have to communicate with others who are like themselves, and to find resources to help them if they are unhappy.
Well, it can
like
be.
Of which never existed. Yeah.
It can be, for example, if you think of transgender people. I used to be a doctor providing mental health support, and that was long before the social media. And I found they had a hard time to get support because it's a very rare condition. So it's not easy to find people who can talk about that with you. And then there was a lot of stigma, of course. And that was not easy for them. And now actually I realize that it is much easier to be adopted in a group that has the same ideas, maybe have a conversation, somebody in Turkey, somebody in Canada. So in that sense, it can be very helpful. The only thing is you should somehow be able to protect young people from all negative effects and manipulation or that can also happen in the context of work.
And yes, exactly. And there is there was more talk maybe 2 years ago than there is now about what you might call, in a very cheap way, the fragility of the young. It seems that they're more easily upset they're triggered by microaggressions. And, people went overboard in their analysis of this and claimed that every campus in the Western world was a minefield of potential snowflakes. And actually, of course, it was wildly exaggerated. And whenever you examined the story that was in the headline, you looked into it deeply and you found that it melted away into nothing, and it really wasn't a story at all.
I think in terms of the pandemic and how we could cope with it to preserve our mental health, are there any special things, also maybe from your own experience, that you think would be good, would be something to try as a coping strategy?
I think I'm very wary, and always have been, of goal setting, because one, if you fail to get the goal, you feel guilty and you failed. And also, whenever you reach a goal, you go, well, is that it? What next?
So that was the goal, and now what?
Yes, exactly. So I'm certainly not one for make a list and do this and make a list and do that, but I absolutely, even in this winter, if you can just get out and look at the way the snow is on the trees, just engage with the natural world to some extent. And you can, if not a goal exactly, but one can set oneself a challenge to see if one can shift one's sleeping patterns in some way so that they are just what you think might be the best kind of sleeping pattern. And there are all kinds of apps that help with white noise, pink noise, brown noise, waves breaking on the shore, and waterfalls and other noises that do really help with sleep. And so you can just sort of concentrate on different aspects, but not as a firm task that you would fail or succeed in, but as a kind of experiment with yourself. Let's see if I can do that. Let me see if I can just shift my sleeping to an hour earlier to bed every night and an hour earlier up every morning, or the other way around. You know, it just small changes that you can make physically about yourself kind of tell your mind that you are in control of yourself. Do you know what I mean?
Yes, I think that would help very much, because then it would alleviate the feeling of being overwhelmed by all these things that happen around us, and press conferences of governments saying, and now we have a lockdown, and we won't be traveling until the end of the winter, and whatever they say. Whereas if you are able to try something, and then you have control over that, and it makes you feel better, that is very good for you. Yes.
And never to feel, as I say, never to feel that you have failed in lockdown. That, you know, never to be made to feel small because other people are posting such fabulous lives, because that's all nonsense. It really is.
I think, well, you should not beat yourself up. I think that brings us back to the Stoicism. If things happen to you, and so there's the bad thing happening to you, but you can make it worse by thinking all kinds of things about yourself, that you failed, that whatever you did wrong, you could have seen it coming. Well, nobody sees this coming. I mean, and so you shouldn't beat yourself up on top of it, because then not only the bad thing happened, but you're also chastising yourself.
You're compounding it.
Yes. So I think that would be a very.
And you know, there's an old story about the Queen of Sheba and Solomon, when Queen of Sheba visited Solomon, and she said to him, they were talking about things. She said, I have heard of a magical ring or medal, gold coin, and that if you own it, if you are happy, it makes you sad, but if you're sad, it makes you happy. This magical. And Solomon thought for a bit, and he clapped his hands and he whispered to his minister, and Solomon said, I have this coin, I'm having it made for you.
Oh, really?
What do you mean? Yeah. And he said, well, just wait, we'll have some sherbet in the meantime. And then this goldsmith comes with this leather glove and this gold coin that he's just minted, and it's dips it in water to cool it. And Solomon says, there, this coin, if you're happy, it'll make you sad. If you're sad, it'll make you happy. And she takes it, and it has written on it, this too shall pass.
Yeah.
Okay. And that's the point. If you're happy, you have to remember that you might not be happy tomorrow. It will pass. And that's sad. And that can make some people almost not trust their happiness, because they can't live in it. They're going to go, I daren't say I'm happy, because whenever I do that, fate drops something on me, a great, and similarly, if you're sad, you sometimes don't believe you're ever going to be happy again. But just to remember that this too shall pass.
But
and it's easier for people my age, because time accelerates and you tend to be more patient when you're older, less impatient at least. And you're also more aware that if something bad is happening, eventually the wheel of fortune will turn, and things, it will pass. But when you're young, you tend to be more impatient, and things that are bad seem to threaten to be permanent. And it's just to remember that, time will flow on and things will improve.
Because at that time, you don't know yet very well how to turn things around or to deal with adversity. You learn that over your life. Actually, I was thinking when you said that about chasing happiness, Aristotle says, whether you have a happy life, that is something that you decide at the end of your life. and you look back.
Yes, that's absolutely right.
You
Yeah.
look back, and then you say, well, yes, my life was happy, although there were all kinds of things happened that were not nice at all. But it depends on a sort of moderation that you
Yeah.
achieve.
But also, it's very important to remember that it's always okay to ask for help.
Yes.
It's always okay. And you can prove this because you know how it's okay if someone asks you for help. You know, if you can't provide it, then of course you can't, but it's actually it's a fine thing. You know, the human's ability to try and help each other or to give advice or to make suggestions is part of what validates us and makes us feel good about ourselves. So you should never feel bad about asking someone for advice, for help, for somewhere to go to calm down, some sort of anything of that nature. People are there to help, and most people are very, very good at doing that, and making a good effort.
Stephen, I think this is a very good message to end our conversation.
Yeah, I agree.
You said that very well. Thank you so much.
Not at all. It's a delight talking to you.
Yes.
And good luck with all your work. And
good
luck to everybody watching. And
thank you.
Let's see each other when all this is over.
Yes. Okay. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.